like to welcome everyone back to our Apologetic series here at the Doors and Angelo. And here joining us today, once again, we have Pastor Richard Swift. Thank you for being here with us once again today.
Well, thank you for having me once again.
Yes, sir. And we're just going to jump into another hot topic. Here's a question that I often get, and it's why does God allow evil or injustices?
Well, that is a pretty hot topic question. If we each got $1 for every time we've been asked as Christians, why does God allow evil in the world? I think we'd be filming this podcast from our condos in Palm Beach, Florida, or something like that, because it's probably the most asked question ever, I think. And so I think the first thing we have to do is get a basic definition of what evil is. And then we also have to get a definition of what are these injustices. So it's one thing to say, why does God allow evil in the world? Or why does God allow injustice? But you would be surprised at what people's idea of what an evil is and what an injustice is. So, first thing we have to do, if we're honestly going to take the time to answer that question, we would have to find out what exactly are these evils that God allows to happen in the world and injustices that causes people to question God. What are those evils? And then once we've established what those evils and injustices are, do we allow other people later on to come forward and contribute to what their opinions are about what those evils and injustices are? So, I mean, I have you in front of me this afternoon. I might as well just start with you. What would be a evil or injustice that you think really hinders people from coming to God because those evils are on planet Earth?
Well, I would say, one of the big ones, and that we as Christians know, uh, you shouldn't do or shouldn't want to do, would be murder or rape. We hear about cases that happen, molestations, within family members and
Mm,
things of that nature. So,
sure.
how can we as Christians be okay with that?
So
And
definitely, if you ever run into a family member that's had another family member murdered, I mean, that's traumatic. I've
right,
never experienced that in my life, or even rape. Of course, that would be probably one of the ones at the top. There will be others, but that would be one of the injustices that people have a hard time accepting why God would allow. Good one, murder and rape. So let's say I do. I go to God and I say, listen, we got public image issues with you on earth, and what could really help your public image, public relations on earth is if you would just stop rape and murder on earth, and then we could move forward from that and say, God says, all right, I just want to be liked. I just want people to accept me. And so, okay, I'm going to stop rape and I'm going to stop murder. And so there we are. Then later on, maybe I run and say your husband, Drigo, maybe 2 weeks later, after we've already discussed we're going to deal with rape and murder, but I run into your husband maybe a week later and he comes up to me and says, hey, I saw that podcast and I really appreciate you going to God and with the issue of murder and rape. But, I have a coworker that I work with and his son has cancer.
mm,
And I've been trying to get him to come out to church and I'm not getting anywhere with him because he's like, you're totally asking the wrong person.
right,
I too totally do not believe in God, a God that would allow my child, 8 years old, to suffer with cancer. And so now Drigo's saying, hey, I know you already went to God with the evil of murder and rape, but cancer, children,
mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, all right, so I'll go back to God. So now I go back to God second time. Now listen, I know I negotiated with you for the evil of murder and rape, and I'm glad that you agreed that there's not going to be any more rape, no more murder
Mm-hmm.
on earth. But I have somebody else has come up to me recently, and they have another issue with the evil that they believe is an injustice on earth, and that's cancer of little children.
Right.
Could you kind of stop that? God says, all right, okay. And so God stops that. No longer is the murder, no longer do we have rape, and no longer do little children have cancer. Then I run into someone a week later and says, hey, saw the podcast. That's a great thing you're doing. Things are getting better. Murder is out, rape is out. Yeah, the children getting cancer, horrible. But I got to tell you, uh, my mother died of cancer when I was 10 years old, and I had to grow up without a mother.
Mm.
And I have a hard time believing in a God that would take a mother away from his child. I think that's an evil that I got you. I got you. I'll go back. So now I'm coming back to God for the fourth time. It started off with it was just murder. It was going to be rape.
Mm-hmm.
Then it was little kids shouldn't have cancer, but now it's basically nobody should have cancer.
Right.
So, and in a way, yeah, who do we say it's okay for them to have cancer? So now I'm going back to God. This is my fourth time back already. And I'm talking to him about, well, I know I came to you that, your public image would be cleared up a little if you did this, but now just cancer in general, we just need to get rid of cancer altogether, God. If you just do that, and don't forget the murder, and don't forget the rape, if you just take care of that, we'll be good, and we can move on. Just trying to deal with people having a problem believing in you because of these evils. We just take care of these, we're good. And so then we have that taken care of. And so where do we go from there? Do you have any? Uh,
Yeah. I mean, I would say famine is a big one as well, and poverty. We see it here. Within the U.S., you do see a bunch of homeless people as well, but even bigger on a bigger scale, Africa, you see children there who sometimes are left without their parents due to being in poverty or vice versa.
sure.
So, you know, there's another thing would be famine and poverty.
That does seem like a horrible evil. I've seen those pictures too. A lot of times, those kids, their parents are dead because of famine. They're probably going to die of famine. It's really a horrible situation, and
Right.
so yeah, that is so. Okay, so I'll go back to God for that one too. And so now I'm back to God for this is like the fifth or sixth time. I said, I came to you earlier about the evil and injustices, but this is my fifth time back now. But just another one's come up, and it's a good point. There's famine. There's kids dying. The parents are dying. They're growing up. I don't even know if they're growing up in orphans in Africa, if they're
Right.
just left on the streets. And a lot of times those kids are dying too. If you could just wipe out the evil and the injustice of famine, then we could move forward. People would believe in you. People would have an easier time accepting that you truly are God. If you just do this one more, then we'll be good. And God's like, okay, all right, another one. And so, but remember the question. Do you remember the question that I asked you at the beginning? What those questions were?
Um, yeah, I have them here. Give me just one second. So it was what are the injustices or evils? And then once we have our or your definition of what evil is, or what is an injustice, and do we set limits on those or can others add to those?
And so that's where this comes into play. Who defines what the evils are and the injustices? And then do we set limits on those, or do we just open it up for people to keep coming back and coming back and coming back? Where does it end? Already, I've gone back to God now 5 or 6 times,
Mm-hmm.
and every time it's somebody else now that has a different injustice or a different situation that, well, this is their evil. And maybe you have maybe in your own personal life, even yourself, or maybe you have
Right.
friends that might watch this podcast and say, oh, well, let me chime in.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I know from experience in the past, that I have a friend, if I'm able to speak on it, who had a child who was taken at a young age. He died in a car accident. And so, what would you say to parents who, in those situations, what do you say to those parents who have lost innocent children? We know that adults have their free will of doing things, but what about the children who we view as they're innocent and they're pure? And how could God do that? Why would he allow
So
that to
you have a
happen?
friend that who lost a child in a car accident?
Yeah. So we were actually we're he grew up with my son, and we were pretty close. And so he was going to be 15 years old, and he was with a friend, and they were, I guess, just driving out late at night. The young boy didn't have a license. And next thing that we know is that they're being drawn out from the river. They found their car in the river. And so no one really knows, what took place that night, or what happened, that, they just lost control, or they were inexperienced, drivers. They're young. So in that sense, how do you justify that, or what can you say to children who have not been able to live a full life?
Mm-hmm. So that does seem like another evil then. I mean, I'm sure having to deal with that mom, she might have a problem too,
Right.
reconciling this with God. And she might be another one that if we were to invite her to church, she might say no. I mean, I have a hard time in believing a God who could have prevented that evil, because again, now that's her evil. It's not one that we've dealt with yet. But now again, you know evil defined by who, and injustices defined by who gets to define that? Because what we'll see is that the perimeter for what is evil or what is unjust just gets broader and broader and broader. And so now we have another one that we haven't covered. So a child dying in a car accident.
Right.
And so the mom says, well, if God's God, he shouldn't allow that to happen. So again, I'll go back to God for that one too. So now this is maybe my seventh time I'm going back to God. And I went to God for the others, but coming back, there's one more evil. There's just another injustice. I'm just trying to help, your public image on earth. We're trying to get people to want to believe in you. And I know we covered this and that, and rape and murder and cancer for kids and cancer for adults. But you know, I mean, young children dying in car accidents, barely living a life, and then the parents having to grieve that. If you could just stop that, that would really help things down there on earth. And God's like, okay, all right, okay, no more young kids dying in car accidents. And so now that is dealt with. And so we think we're good until a week later, I run into someone says, hey, I was watching your podcast on, why God allows evil and injustice in the world. And you brought up some good ones. And I'm glad that you went to God and petitioned for him, and that
Mm.
there's not going to be any more, young children dying in car wrecks. What an evil that is. Injustice of poverty. I'm so glad that God's going to take care of that. And murders, we shouldn't have to deal with murders. There shouldn't be murder. And rape is a horrible thing. But something that surprising come up in your podcast was child porn. I
Right.
mean, what could be more evil than child porn? How can you sit there and talk about God allowing these evils and not bring that up? Oh, well, yeah, I don't know how. Yeah, no, you're right. That's a horrible evil. It probably should
Yeah.
be back up there at the top. Yeah, I mean, how can God allow child pornography? No, you're right. So I'm going to go back to God now, and I'm going to hit him up for that. So now I'm coming back to God. What am I on? What? How many times? I'm on the eighth or ninth time. It
Yeah,
started off with,
perhaps.
remember, it was just going to be, we take care of murder, we take care of rape. That was yours at the beginning. We're
Mm-hmm.
good. But now we have her and we have him, and they're all good. Child porn, you can't say what that should be
Right.
acceptable. So now I'm coming back to God. This is like the eighth or ninth time. God, I know I've come to you for this. I come to you for that. But just one more. Child pornography. That, what an evil that is. God, if you could just wipe out child pornography, people would be so much more willing to believe in you and serve you. And the people that we're trying to get to come out to church would be willing to come out. And God says, yeah, okay, all right, well, okay, no more of
Mm-hmm.
that. Now I'm going to take care of that. So then we have another one that comes to me later on and says, I'm glad you took care of that. But uh, I have my own evil too, that I just, my parents were killed in a drinking and driving accident by
Right.
a drunk. And sure enough, the guy that was behind the wheel that was drinking, he lived. And my parents were in the other car and they died. I don't understand how God allows someone to get drunk, get behind a wheel, crash into a car, and it's the people that are innocent, that weren't
Right.
drinking, that die, and the one that was the drunk that lives. I'll never step foot inside of a church in all my life.
Right.
I don't believe that there could be a God that would allow that evil. Whoa, wow, that's an evil that hasn't come up yet. You know
Yeah.
what? That's a good one. So no, you're right. I mean, I'll go back to God for that. So now I'm going back to God. What are we on now? What,
10th or
10th,
11th, I
10th or
think.
11th. So God, I know I came to you way at the beginning, and
Mm-hmm.
Amy and I were talking about, just trying to, clear up your public image on earth. People saying I can't serve a God with all the evils, start off with murder and rape. But here, and I've come to you with all the other ones. I'm glad you're taking care of the famine. I'm glad you're taking care of that little kids aren't going to die in car wrecks. I'm glad you're taking care of the cancer, not just for the kids, but for the adults. But this one, I mean, it hadn't come up yet. Otherwise, I would have brought it up to your attention. But this guy lost both his parents in a drinking and driving accident. You really gotta stop that. You can't allow drunks to be getting into cars, driving drunk, and killing innocent people.
Mm-hmm.
And God's like, okay, all right, okay, I'm going to stop that one. And so the question is, I hope people that are listening and watching this are catching on. It's,
Right.
at first, the question is how can a God allow evil and injustice to exist in the earth? I have a hard time believing in that. But the question is who gets to define evil, and who gets to define what is injustice? And do we ever set perimeters? And do we ever say, this is the line, we're going to draw the line, and after this one, that's the last one? I mean, what would you
Right.
have to say to that?
Now we have people who are coming to God, and that's happening to them as well.
Right.
So,
So it'd be the same thing to make the world a better place and make everyone
right.
more loving towards God and more accepting